夢じゃない。ファイナルファンタジー6、4月2日、スーパーファミコンで発売。Square.
One of my favorite styles of gaming is the Japanese role-playing game, also known as the JRPG. It feels like most of my favorite games from the past few years or so have been JRPGs. Depending on how willing you are to stretch the definition. I like the turn-based combat and the strategy involved, as well as the often epic journeys you go on and the memorable characters that you spend time with. A lot of my favorite games from the past 5 years or so have been comfortably falling into the JRPG genre, and my future includes more JRPGs. This wasn't always the case, as it felt like there was a huge part of time where JRPGs just fell out of flavor with mainstream audiences in America at least. And this is something I've been thinking about for a while, and it makes sense to me, and this is why I want to explain today. In this video, I'll be talking about what killed JRPGs and what brought them back into mainstream relevancy. Before we begin this journey, make sure you join the party by hitting the subscribe button and the bell as well for some extra buffs. And with that out of the way, let's begin.
寂しい。そういうことなら。
Part 1, The Rise of the Genre. This isn't going to be a comprehensive list or history of JRPGs, so I'll be brief here. JRPGs have been around for a hot minute. They really exploded in popularity in Japan thanks to the Dragon Quest series on the Famicom. And for many Americans, many of the best games on the Super Nintendo were JRPGs. Granted, the footage I'm showing you here is from Phantasy Star 1 on the Master System, but still. I think what really exploded the genre's popularity in the West was Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1. A huge game that many will put as their intro to the genre. And I can't forget about the Pokemon games, which I never got into, but definitely got many young gamers into JRPGs and the monster collecting genre. The success of these two, well, technically 4 titles, helped the genre explode in the United States. While there are plenty of successful JRPGs on the PlayStation 1, the 6th generation of consoles really helped explode the genre. You had the Sega Dreamcast, the Sony PlayStation 2, the Nintendo GameCube, and newcomer Microsoft with the Xbox. Pour one out for the Sega Dreamcast, it was too good for this sinful world. To me, this is one of the best generations of gaming, and that isn't old man boomer nostalgia talking. If you love JRPGs, you had a seemingly endless amount of games to choose from, especially if you had a PlayStation 2. Now, this isn't going to be a comprehensive list, so don't be in the comments be like, "Duh, you forgot RPG, Big Sword Guy's Quest for the Ever Titty Phone." I am only focusing on JRPGs here and some of the major titles in this era. Square Enix was easily the kings of this generation. Despite the merger with Enix, they kept swinging with home runs like Final Fantasies 10 through 12, and of course, many spin-offs. Dragon Quest VIII found its footing in the United States, and of course we got the cracked out world of Kingdom Hearts, a game series that is best described as someone doing Jenkem while watching Aladdin and writing the first thing that came to mind after the come down. Alice hit their stride here with the Shin Megami Tensei series, as well as the spin-off Persona, which kind of eclipsed the SMT series. Namco's Tales series finally broke out in the States thanks to Tales of Symphonia on the GameCube, as well as having the cult classics Xenosaga and Baten Kaitos. And of course, it would be remiss to not talk about the greatest JRPG of all time, Cory in the House on the DS. No, really, it's Skies of Arcadia. Skies of Arcadia is the best JRPG of all time, and I will die on that hill. I also want to bring up something else here. Chances are, if you are in your mid to late 20s to early to mid 30s and grew up in America, there's a good chance you have anxiety, depression, some form of addiction, and are afraid of climate change and economic collapse. Chances are you also consumed a lot of Japanese media when you were young. This might be lost on younger viewers or viewers not from America, but there was a Japanese invasion during the late 90s and most of the 2000s. It caused a lot of shit like this to happen.
Give me strength! Dual wield! Here!
It was a terrible time, but a great time at the same time. I and many young people became obsessed with anime thanks to Toonami exposing the West to some awesome shows like Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, Outlaw Star, Yu Yu Hakusho, Gundam Wing, among many others. It was a unique situation because Japan had the eyes, ears, hands, and attention of a lot of youth in America. So if you wonder why there is this weird media boner about Japan, blame things like Toonami and Kingdom Hearts. Mostly Kingdom Hearts. Much like anything in life, the good times had to come to an end. By 2008 or so, JRPGs as well as anime was falling out of relevancy with younger audiences in America. I think the last major game in the genre, or at least the general consensus was good, was Persona 4 on the PlayStation 2. And by this time in 2008, the 7th generation, aka the HD era, had started, so we're gonna get bigger things, right? Right? That wasn't the case. To me, The fall of JRPGs happened during the 7th generation of gaming, aka the PS Wii60 era of gaming, and I can give you the dates from 2009 until 2016, and I blame 4 reasons why that happened. Not Strong Zero. Strong Zero is never a problem, it is always the solution. For one, a lot of Japanese publishers during this time went through some issues. Atlus went through financial trouble and were eventually bought out by Sega. Sega themselves started to eat paint and made some baffling business choices. Namco and Bandai fused together and screwed over a ton of products because of that. Similarly, Koei and Tecmo also fused together. Around this time, Konami embarked on their Quest of Darkness, and Square, well, we'll get to Square Enix in a second. The second part was the new consoles. There were just too many different consoles, each requiring different tools, and each system having their own target demographic. In the States, the 360 and the Wii were dominating. Microsoft tried to appeal to Japanese gamers more with RPGs such as Star Ocean and Tales of Vesperia, but both games sold below expectations because Xbox fans in the States can't read. And of course, the Xbox was just too huge to fit in Japanese apartments. The PS3 didn't really pick up steam until 2009 or so, and while the Wii was a success worldwide, it required different skills to develop for. I'm not forgetting about handhelds here. The PSP did well enough in the States, and it did gangbusters in Japan. However, the DS just blew it out of the water worldwide, and there were a lot of great RPGs on both systems. I feel like handhelds were never the focus for a lot of gamers or the gaming industry at large, despite how much handhelds sold during this time. For developers, it was a lot cheaper to produce a game for a handheld system like the PSP or DS, rather than spend a ton of cash on an HD game on a system that doesn't really sell that well in your home country, aka the Xbox 360 in Japan. And I feel like a lot of developers at the time probably thought like, hey, we can make more money if we just focus on cheaper games on handhelds. Following that, a lot of games weren't getting exported outside of Japan. Localization takes time and money, and if big names like Star Ocean or Tales aren't doing so hot in the States, what chance do other RPGs have? Plenty of Namco's games got stuck in Japan, like a PS3 port of Vesperia, as well as Xenosaga on the DS. Sega's Valkyria Chronicles 3 and Shining Resonance were stuck in Japan for the longest time, not to mention the long and troubled history of Phantasy Star Online 2. Thankfully, some of these games have been getting localized in recent years. Also, shoutouts to Nisa, Exceed, and other smaller companies for taking risks on localizing niche JRPGs. If I had to point to 2 games that killed JRPGs, at least in the mainstream, those would be Final Fantasies 13 and 14. Square Enix really vanished up their own ass during this era, and that's the only way I can describe what happened here. 13 sold really well, and actually reviewed pretty well too, but depending on who you ask, it's either one of the better games in the series or a hot mess, like me every Saturday night in the Booyah. 14, for its part, launched in a terribly broken state, and despite many attempts to fix it, the launch of 14 ended up costing Square Enix a lot of money and goodwill, as well as ending the career of one of Square's founders, Hiromichi Tanaka. For a lot of people, Square Enix, and by extension Final Fantasy, were the face of JRPGs, kinda like how Mario is the face of platformers. If Final Fantasies 13 and 14 were the best they got, why bother sticking with the genre? It doesn't help that a lot of Square's titles were either going to handhelds or just being stuck in development. Heck, see Final Fantasy 15 and 7 Remake. In general, tastes between the West and the East were diverging during this time. Gamers in the West were preferring Western RPGs, games from BioWare or Bethesda. Also, hot take, Bethesda RPGs were always garbage. People in the East were preferring their RPGs on handhelds and on mobile, and this divergent taste can also be seen around the anime in this time. The action anime that captured the imaginations of young people in America was falling to shitty dubs and endless Naruto and Bleach filler.
How did that happen?
Yo ho ho, he took a bite of gum gum.
Japan got some good shit, but for the most part, there was a lot of otaku pandering during this period of time. Let's be real, we all had our weeaboo phase, and for me, my phase was from 2006, from 2009, when I was going into high school, and man, there was some absolute trash that came out during that time. In general, being a weeaboo is a cursed existence. The time from 2009 to 2016 was pretty grim if you were a fan of JRPGs. However, trends and tropes don't stay dead, and things started to turn around. The Sony Vita did really well in Japan and was home to plenty of RPGs, but the Vita died a painful, lonely death outside of Japan, so many games got stuck on the platform or never left Japan. Pour one out for the Vita. On the other hand, the 3DS sold extremely well, and games like the Bravely series sold very well too, much to Square's surprise. It was proof that classic RPGs had an audience outside of Japan. 2 other games really helped open up the door to the genre. The first was Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii. Despite Nintendo of America's lack of faith in the series, it eventually got a limited release in America and actually sold better in the States than it did in Europe or Japan. And Shulk being smashed helped a lot too. From Software's Soul series is also credited as helping RPGs come back into vogue. It doesn't have a lot in common with standard RPGs, but its brutal difficulty and grim vibe, in combination with some of the elements of classic RPGs, helped earn the Soul series a devout fan base, as well as creating a new genre of gaming altogether. While these helped get that fire built, there were three major things that happened in the mid-2010s that helped reignite the JRPG flame, at least in the mainstream. For one, Square Enix got their heads out of their asses. You see, Square originally thought that the 8th generation of gaming wasn't going to go anywhere, and that PC and mobile was the way of the future, and they weren't the only publisher with that mindset. If you wonder why the beginning of that generation was a bit weird, that's why. Even though Final Fantasy 13 and 14 helped kill the genre outside of Japan, Square Enix would help revive the genre later on with two big titles. Final Fantasy 15 finally escaped development hell and was a critical and commercial success. While a bit of a polarizing game and the good times didn't last for that title, it certainly got a lot of people into the genre again. Final Fantasy 14, A Realm Reborn, on the other hand, earned a lot of goodwill for Square Enix for salvaging what was originally a broken RPG, and thanks to a good stream of content updates, became the biggest MMORPG on the market. The other thing was the Nintendo Switch being a huge success. The Switch struck a nice balance between the Western wants for a bigger console games and Japanese gamers' desires for handheld gaming. There's a reason why so many of the Switch's biggest hits are JRPGs. Not to discredit the PlayStation 4 though, which eventually sold extremely well and gave developers faith in console gaming, and of course Steam being really popular amongst JRPG fans. Above all else, good games were finally being released and finding an audience. Games like Persona 5, Nier Automata, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Octopath Traveler, Dragon Quest XI, Yakuza Like a Dragon, among many others, have all been critical and commercial hits. Even more niche JRPGs such as the Trail series, Atelier, and Ys are gaining larger fan bases. Another thing I should mention is that a lot of Western published games during the later part of the 8th generation were either surrounded in controversy, chasing trends, or just being shit in the first place. The hole that publishers like EA, Activision, or Ubisoft are leaving is being filled by awesome JRPGs that companies like Sega, Square, or Nintendo are happily filling. Not to mention a huge indie scene with games inspired by RPGs that are doing their best to rip off Earthbound and make the most annoying fan bases ever. And just to tie it back to anime saw a revival in 2012 thanks to the revival of Toonami, as well as a lot of high quality shows being properly dubbed for anime fans. And it also helped that streaming made it very easy for fans to get their anime fix. When you adapt to the market, you reap the rewards, and we can see that with JRPGs now. JRPGs are back, anime is good again, and I'm here for it. And there you have it. There's the rise, fall, and rise again of the JRPG genre, at least in the West. When you're talking about a game's series dying, it's pretty easy to identify what killed it. It's like, hey, Star Fox Zero, didn't that game suck? But when you're talking about a whole genre dying, there's a lot to it. And in fact, when I was writing the script, I kept having to scrap it because there was just so much content I wanted to put in, and I was always unsure if I was getting every point I wanted to make. But you know, I think I made a pretty good video here, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it makes some kind of sense. So let me some info down there in the comments. Are you a fan of JRPGs? What do you think about the video? What are your favorite JRPGs of all time? Let me know down there in the comments. And while you're down there, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell as well for notifications on future videos. Also hit me up on the social media, Twitter, Instagram at ZMangz. And with that, I sign off for now. Have a nice day everyone, and I'll see you on the next video. Night everyone, take care.